Good evening. I'd like to call to order the April 9, 2019 Truckee Town Council meeting. And Judy, may we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Klofstad?
Here.
Vice Mayor Goodwin?
Here.
Mayor Tierman?
Here.
Councilmember Abrams?
Here.
And Councilmember Pallavi is noted as absent this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you would all please rise and join me in the council in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, before we get started with presentations and the regular agenda, we always have an opportunity for public comment on anything that is not on the agenda tonight. And that moment is now, so if anyone has public comment on anything not on the agenda, please step forward. You'll have 3 minutes. We have a 3-minute timer right over here. Your right, my left. And looks like Pat Davidson has some comment.
No, it's not.
No.
Now, lights on. All right. Good evening, Mayor Tierman, members of the council. My name is Pat Davison with the Contractors Association of Truckee Tahoe. Here tonight doing our homework from 2 weeks ago. So I've provided to you some written comment. This was based on the 7 questions in the staff report, and I'll just summarize a couple of the high points of that statement. A question was posed about making locals only an alternative equivalent to traditional affordable housing is a standalone question. We do think locals only housing can be a one-to-one replacement for traditional affordable housing, given our crisis today. Traditional affordable housing with rent and for sale price caps below market rate is more difficult because costs cannot be recovered in the same way. The for-profit developer is subsidizing the cost of the traditional affordable units and having to find a way to pay for the project. And in many ways, that developer is not well versed in the vocabulary and operations. We think it's in the town's best interest to find those affordable housing developers who specialize in that housing product to partner with the for-profit developer, where in essence the town becomes the matchmaker. So that's idea number 1. Adding a new income level, local achievable, does not mean that all future units are locals only. It does mean that new policies are drafted and discussed. We need those units as much as we need traditional affordable units. Please do not treat one income level different from another level. Apart from the larger residential projects being considered, there are other opportunities to create a locals-only housing supply. Smaller lots, single family, tiny homes, duplexes, and triplexes are all ways to create that housing supply. These are not dependent on larger residential projects. Another idea, the town can be proactive to obtain affordable lower income deed restricted units, do a site inventory for opportunity sites, find willing owners, and then draft an RFP for those nonprofit developers, again, kind of in that matchmaker role where the town becomes part of a joint venture. Just an idea for you to consider. Use the Vail and Deed model to purchase homes using those deed restriction dollars and deed restrict those existing homes for the lower income levels. There were a couple of other questions. I'm not going to go through that, but just to mention, we can support a use or control that is based on occupancy, full-time residency, as well as a prohibition on vacation rentals. We think those 2 provisions will separate housing into more manageable buckets. The investors and second homeowners are competing amongst themselves. They're not in the locals bucket, and that will help you answer your question. And last point, we do not support the affordable by design suggestion. Last sentence, because those are not controlled. We do think if you have occupancy and use controls, affordable by design is a good solution and deserves attention. Thank you very much for your patience. Happy reading, happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. There is a lot here in your letter, so I think we're probably all going to want to take the time to read through this carefully, and I suspect that well, I know there'll be a lot more housing discussion on our docket in the weeks and months to come. So, and we'll definitely get back to you with any questions. So thank you. Any other public comment, again, on anything not on the agenda tonight? And if you could state your name, you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Josh Ratcliffe. I'm here to commend the Truckee Police Department. I was a board member on a homeowners association board in Truckee. Myself and other board members suspected that one of our employees had embezzled a large sum of money from the association. I want to thank Officer Brett Heath and Chief Leftwich for the thorough and meticulous investigation that was completed. This was a complex case, and Officer Brett Heath did an outstanding job working with the 100-plus victims. The suspect recently pled guilty to felony theft, and restitution has been ordered. I want to again thank Officer Brett Heath and Chief Leftwich. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. And Chief, and great work.
And thanks for the public comment. It's always great to hear good feedback.
Okay, any other public comment tonight? All right, seeing none, we'll close public comment and we'll go on to our first presentation tonight, which is an Earth Day proclamation. And I'd like to ask Karen Stanley, let's see, JP Prince and Abe Hain to join me at the podium. Hi. Hey, how you doing? Good to meet you. So tonight we have a special proclamation regarding Earth Day. Whereas the Truckee celebrates Earth Day each day with its dedication to preserving and protecting our local and global natural resources through sustainable policies, community engagement, and creative source reduction practices. And whereas local students are helping to raise awareness around the downfalls of single-use plastic straws and polystyrene, and whereas 3 local businesses are participating in an innovative reusable to-go box pilot to reduce disposable to-go containers, and whereas Keep Truckee Green will host its 3rd annual Earth Day Fix-It Clinic with its partner at the Truckee Roundhouse, empowering residents to repair household items instead of throwing them away, on Thursday, April 11th from 4:30 to 7 p.m. And whereas the region will celebrate the Tahoe Truckee Earth Day Festival on Saturday, April 20th, 2019 from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Village at Squaw Valley. And whereas a refillable propane cylinder exchange event will occur, collecting 2 single-use 1-pound propane cylinders in exchange for 1 refillable propane canister at the Keep Truckee Green booth at the festival. And whereas the Truckee community will carry the enthusiasm surrounding Earth Day into their everyday practice. All right. Okay, I'm almost done. Almost done. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the mayor of the town of Truckee that the 20th day of April 2019 is Truckee Earth Day. So, congratulations. Present this, and if you'd care to make a few words, you're happy to have you do that. Our clock is at 0, so I think we're safe.
I'm Karen Stanley from the Truckee Roundhouse, and it's an honor to be serving the planet Earth with our Fix It event. It's been a great partnership with Keep Truckee Green, and we hope you'll all join us on Thursday from 4:30 to 7.
Sounds good. No, we'll let Erica add anything she wants.
Say just one word. I just really wanted to thank Karen for opening the Truckee Roundhouse for us to host our Fix-It clinics there. It's an amazing space. If you haven't been there, they are fully outfitted with all sorts of tools, more than you would ever know how to use. And I also really wanted to thank JP and Abe for being here, because they have been our most dedicated volunteers. It's a volunteer-led event, and we could not do it without them. And they have been the only 2 volunteers who have been at every single Fix-It clinic, which is 5 to date. So thank you to them. They are our true heroes for the Fix-It clinics.
Thanks, Eric. We've got a second proclamation tonight, and again, the timer is on 0, so good. This is Donate Life Month proclamation, and I'd like to call up Jessica Vela, who is representing the DMV and Sierra Donor Services, and Becky Leatherman and Tracy Copeland, if you'd like to join as well. Okay. All right. Whereas organ, eye, and tissue donation are life-giving acts recognized worldwide as expressions of compassion and generosity to those in need, and whereas more than 114,000 individuals nationwide, over 21,000 in California, are currently on the National Organ Transplant waiting list, including 12 Truckee residents. Sadly, 22 patients die each day before an organ becomes available. And whereas a single individual's donation of the heart, lungs, liver, kidneys, pancreas, and small intestine can save up to 8 lives, and the donation of tissue can save and transform the lives of up to 75 others. And whereas there is good news, in 2018, over 1 million lives were saved and transformed by organ, eye, and tissue donors, including 36,529 organ transplants and many tissue transplants. And whereas the spirit of giving and the decision to become a registered donor are not restricted by age or medical condition, and whereas as of April 2019, over 12,000 Truckee residents have joined the almost 15 million Californians on the Donate Life California registry, ensuring that their wish to be organ and tissue donors can be honored. And whereas the Truckee DMV has partnered with Donate Life California and has assisted over 11,000 residents who checked yes to becoming an organ, eye, and tissue donor when obtaining or renewing a driver's license at the Truckee DMV. Now therefore be it claimed by the mayor of the town of Truckee that in recognition of National Donate Life Month, the month of April 2019 is hereby proclaimed National Donate Life Month in the town of Truckee. And in doing so, we encourage Truckee community members to check yes when applying for or renewing their driver's license or ID card, or by signing up at donatelifecalifornia.org.
Hi, thank you, everybody. My name is Jessica. I'm accepting this on behalf of the DMV here in Truckee and Sierra Donor Services. Truckee actually has the highest designation donor rate, so congratulations to all of you. It's at, I believe, over 60%, around 64%. And the Donate Life California registry is the largest in the world, and we actually just passed a milestone this month of 15.5 million people. So thank you.
So thank you, Mayor Tierman and the council, for once again celebrating Donate Life Month with us. And I'm Tracy Copeland, and I received the gift of life 21 years ago in the form of a liver. And my liver died suddenly for reasons we don't know. I was healthy and skiing and active one day, and the next day I was sick. And so over a period of about 90 days, my liver died. I was called to Stanford University, and I was in a coma. And if it wasn't for the decision that another family made in the middle and in the midst of their own unimaginable grief, myself and a lung recipient 2 kidney recipients and a heart recipient wouldn't have a second chance at life. So for me, it's an honor to work with Sierra Donor Services as an ambassador and Sierra Nevada Donor Awareness. We work together in the communities to raise awareness for this tremendous need and to honor our donors and our donor families. And so, as you guys know, I'm back again this year, and I just want to thank you ever so much for this. Isn't just a little thing to recognize it, and Truckee is just such a wonderful town, and for everybody that is in this community, that is such a giving community, with Earth Day being, just a perfect example, and you can recycle yourself. So anyway, I just want to thank you all for joining with us together and celebrating this month as Donate Life Month.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you. And at this point, would like to open this to council comment, if any, and we'll also open it up to public comment.
I'm just so proud of our community. I don't really have a whole lot to add, but I'm so honored to serve our town and to be a part of this community, to live here and to raise my family here. So thank you, all of Truckee.
Yeah, and thank you for all of your hard work on encouraging people to become organ donors. As a dear friend passed away, I was one of the first responders, and she did not make it, but she was an organ donor for, I think, 7 people had a new life because of her. And it's close to home. So if there's anything more we can do to help, please let us know and keep up the great work.
Yes, thank you everybody for the wonderful work, and also for Earth Day, one of my favorite days of the year, and the Fix It Clinic that I hope to participate in this year. It's pretty exciting that we can provide that to our community, so thank you everybody. Great evening already.
Yeah, I think well said by my fellow council members, and certainly want to give anyone from the public an opportunity to comment as well on either one of the presentations tonight. Okay, so we'll go ahead and close public comment and thank everyone again. At this point, we're going to move on to our consent calendar. We've got let's see, seven items on the consent calendar tonight. Item 6.1, the minutes of our March 12th, 2019 meeting. 6.2, Yorga Ranch Trail Easement Agreement with the Truckee Sanitary District. 6.3, Glasner Tentative Map Denial. Applicant Robert Wood, Millennium Planning and Engineering, and the owners Christine Lee and Frank Glasner. 6.4, approval of Memorandum of Understanding with Truckee Police Officers Association for the period July 1, 2018 to June 30th, 2021. Item 6.5, approval of side letters with employee groups. 6.6, Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, Compliance Plan, Policies and Procedures Against Discrimination Related to Race, Color, and National Origin. And 6.7, the Truckee River Legacy Trail Phase 4 permitting and 100% design and construction documents, CO 702. So any member of the council care to pull an item? Member of staff?
Yes, we have one to pull.
Okay.
At the applicant's request, 6.3, the Glasner tentative map, they've asked to be on a later agenda.
Okay. So that'll be continued to a future date.
Yes.
Okay. And then I'm going to note that I'm going to be recusing myself from item 6.2. So any member of the public care to have an item pulled? Okay. So I think with that, we'll entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar, recognizing that item 6.3 is going to be continued. And I will be recusing myself in my vote from item 6.2.
I'll move items 6.1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. I think we've addressed the consent calendar for this evening, and we're ready to move on to our first discussion item, which is item 7.1, an easement abandonment at 12427 Poppy Lane, and the applicant owner is Gary Obringer, represented by Dennis Dodds, and I understand Dennis is not here this evening, but Lanisi, you'll be here in the event of any questions. So with that, Laura, I think you're going to walk us through this.
Right. Good evening, Council. To give you a quick overview of the project location, it's here, the yellow dot is the project site. It's in Prosser Lakeview. You can see the National Forest land backs up to the parcel. This is just a little bit of a closer view of the surrounding properties and then a closer view of the actual project site and adjacent properties. These are a couple of exhibits that Dennis Dodds put together for this application. I do have a larger version of the site plan if there's any detail that you would like to be able to see in greater detail. You'll notice that these are flip-flopped, so they're going opposite directions. That might be a little bit confusing. The abandonment exhibit over here shows the portion of the 15-foot public utility easement that's proposed to be abandoned. And then the site plan shows the footprint of the proposed residence and garage and the location of the septic field. The applicants have asked the town council to approve an abandonment of the westerly 7 feet of the 15-foot public utility easement. This is an easement that was recorded along that side of these parcels that back up to the forest land for the purpose of utilities. And the purpose of that for the applicants is to allow them to construct a 2-bedroom house. What they've shown on their site plan is a little under 1,700 square feet for the house and 571 square feet for the garage. So in order to accommodate a septic system that would allow a 2-bedroom house, they have asked for that easement to be reduced. So as part of this process, the applicant always has to get approval from all of the utility companies and special districts that they've either abandoned their interest already or that they've authorized the council to do it on their behalf. So that's all been taken care of. There's an indemnification agreement that we require for these to make sure that the town doesn't have any liability. And the council action that would be required would be to adopt the resolution and authorize the town manager to sign that indemnification agreement. So for this type of easement abandonment, there are 3 different findings, and the council would need to make one of the 3. These were all in your staff report, so I won't go through all of them. But the finding that staff is recommending that you use for this approval would be the finding number 1, which basically is that the easement hasn't been used for the purpose that it was put in place for at least 5 years. We are bringing this to you as a real agenda item as opposed to a consent calendar item because the neighbors have asked for an opportunity to comment. There was one comment letter that was signed by 4 different parties that live near the project site, and that was included in your staff report. If you have any questions about any of the comments that were included in that, I'm happy to walk through that with you. So our recommendation is that you adopt Resolution 2019-14, which would approve the easement abandonment and authorize the town manager to sign the indemnification agreement. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Laura. So what we'll do is we'll take council clarifying questions at this point in time, and then we'll open it up to public comment after that. And then we'll bring it back to council for discussion deliberations. So any questions from council?
I do have one. Under what circumstances, probably for Andy, would we deny an easement abandonment which has received all the agency approvals?
If you think that you can't make any of the findings, that would be a basis for denial. But I do have to point out the council, the town really, is never at all obligated to say yes to any of these. It's just that typically if the findings can be made, the council has historically been willing to, but you don't have to.
Thank you.
And obviously, so We all know Prosser Lakeview is a neighborhood that uses septic systems. Obviously, we don't want those to overflow, which is why is even here. What's the body that regulates the size of dwelling and size of septic system to make sure that that's all in compliance?
That's the Nevada County Department of Environmental Health.
And so Nevada County Department of Environmental Health, have they engaged on this so far?
Yes, they provided a comment letter that they had reviewed the report that was put together in 2002 and then recertified as part of this application.
And so their certification includes that the system that they want to install is big enough to serve the house they want to build.
Correct.
This approval doesn't have any, there's no legal binding, there's no kind of, if we approve this, then therefore a certain kind of dwelling would be approved. Is there a separate approval process for the actual dwelling?
Yeah, it would be through the building permit.
And then the thing on the comment letter that stood out to me is it seems like the applicants are proposing a 2-bedroom home. The public comment is saying that there is an objection to this being a 3-bedroom home. Maybe, and that might be a question for any members of the public that are here about why there's that discrepancy and that fact.
I think the issue was the neighbor who had wanted to build a 3-bedroom house back in the 80s was not able to because the county didn't allow them to have a house that big based on their septic restrictions. In this case, they could have a 1-bedroom house and they're hoping to build a 2-bedroom.
So okay, great. And certainly like to hear more in public comment, but the objection seems to be that adding a bedroom over what the original lot was is sort of the extra thing that, all right.
And then, Laura, the only question I have is with a building permit application, there's also a review, and would there be opportunity for public comment during that process as well? Although there's not a hearing per se, it's just an application, but I suppose comment could be received.
A building permit could be appealed if someone objected.
Okay. All right, thank you. Assuming no further questions, we'll open this item up for public comment. You'll have 3 minutes to get to the podium. And 3 minutes to speak. If you could state your name and then also be sure to fill out a speaker card and give it to Judy Price there in the back. It'd be great.
Judy's where?
Right there. You'll need to press the button on the mic, and if the red light's on, we can hear you.
Good evening, Mayor, Town Council, and staff. I'm Derek Adamak. Excuse me. I want to acknowledge that planning staff, in particular Laura Dabe, has been very helpful in this process. Thank you for considering the comments that my Poppy Lane neighbors and I submitted to you. I hope to clarify those concerns. This project exceeds the general plan land use designation of 1 to 2 dwellings per acre. The staff report does not appear to address this. The public utility easement, or PUE, is a benefit to all. We are concerned that the easement abandonment applies to one person's parcel. There is no parity for neighbors. Why give up a public asset when we do not have all services such as sewer and other public benefits? We are concerned that the parcel needs a PUE for a lot not buildable by itself. Concerned that the septic system will not be adequate, resulting in runoff into neighboring properties and the national forest. If the neighboring septic systems fail as a result of the PUE abandonment from that parcel, how will these damages be remedied? These concerns do not appear to be addressed in the staff report. You are probably aware that some septic systems have failed in the delicate soils of our neighborhood. Our final concern is that, to our knowledge, the parcel owner does not reside in Truckee. Although that should not preclude him from building, this may be a second home or potential Airbnb, which affects the character of our neighborhood and does not address Truckee's pressing housing needs. Furthermore, occupancy of vacation rentals often exceeds septic capabilities. We request you consider our perspective and integrate that perspective into your decision-making. We request you not approve the easement abandonment for reasons of parity, loss of public assets, and potential damage to neighboring septic systems and national forest. We request that you not approve the project because it exceeds the general plan land use designation.
Thank you. Is it Garrick or Garrick? Garrick?
Derek, like an oil derrick.
Oh, Derek. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Derek.
And do you have any questions for me?
I don't. Yeah, we'll get to that afterwards. Any other public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment and would like to ask staff if you can address the general plan comment and any of the other comments that were brought up by Derek.
Sure. I did add a slide showing the general plan land use designations for the area. So all of the properties in gold there are the residential 1 to 2 dwelling units per acre. So I believe, and can be corrected if I'm wrong here, but I think the public comment letter was saying that within these parcels that are in the immediate area of the project site, that having an additional house would exceed the number of dwelling units per acre. But the way that the subdivision and the way the land use designations work, it's based over the whole area. So it's not parcel specific. And it was zoned for a single family residence.
Okay.
And the size of the residence doesn't change. It's still a dwelling unit, whether it's 1 or 2 or 3 bedrooms. Is that right?
Right.
Okay.
With regard to the property owner's intention to live here permanently, full-time, second home, it's completely irrelevant, and the council cannot consider that.
Thank you.
I have a question, if that's okay. Yeah. Can you explain what the connection or overlap is with us deciding to grant the easement or not versus the project being approved or not? How interrelated are they? And the project being approved as, I guess, as described, and then maybe even leading on to, if we grant an easement, does that mean that this project is granted and that the septic is not going to be adequate? Like, how can we ensure that septic will be adequate in relation to easement granting?
Yes.
Let me take a stab at this, if I might. The town cannot issue a building permit until the Nevada County Department of Environmental Health approves the septic system. They're the ones responsible for enforcing that. The standards have gotten progressively tighter. So anything that gets built with a septic system today, it's going to be it's a much tougher set of standards than it was 30 years ago, for example. So this action, if you decide to take it, does not result in the project being approved. It does not shortcut any of the review that the town and the county have to go through to evaluate the system and evaluate the construction of the house and whether the square footage of the house would exceed the septic system's capabilities. The commenter said, well, what happens if it overflows? Well, if the septic system fails, I mean, I would imagine that the neighbors would be immediately telling both Nevada County Department of Environmental Health and the Forest Service, hey, there's raw sewage running through the forest, and that would get everyone's attention pretty quickly. So all that the town can do really is rely on the county to permit the system and to sign off on what does or does not work in those conditions, and then the town approves, or I guess potentially doesn't approve, a building permit. But I do have to point out, I mean, Laura's right, I guess a building permit could be appealed, but building permits in general are ministerial. There's not really much discretion entailed there. I mean, the town's role with the building permit is really just making sure that it complies with the building code and with other town requirements. The town does not decide whether a house or a structure that just requires a building permit is a good idea or is a project that's right for Truckee, because a lot of those decisions have been made through the adoption of the zoning code and through the adoption of local amendments to the state building code. So really, although this decision doesn't result in the issuance of a building permit, there's not a lot of discretion that goes into issuing a building permit. If the standards are met, typically the building permit gets issued.
And I would just add, this is the larger version of the site plan. If the abandonment is approved, then this site design could potentially be approved through the building permit. As you can see, they're meeting the setbacks and presumably site coverage. That's all things that we would be looking at through the building permit. If they're meeting those standards, then it could be approved. If the abandonment isn't approved, you can see that the septic area would have to be smaller, the building would likely have to be smaller, and they would have the one-bedroom house instead of a two-bedroom. So that would be the impact of not approving.
Any other questions? I just had one. The easement today was originally intended to be potentially used by a host of different utility companies, right? It could potentially be for electrical, water, sewer. And are there any plans for sewer system in Prosser that we're aware of? Yeah.
I don't think we're aware of any plans in the future.
And then all the, again, I think the staff report indicated the utilities all indicated that they were okay with the abandonment of the area, correct?
Correct, and that included Truckee Sanitary District.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I would just, as far as comments go, this seems like a reasonable request to me, and while I think some of the concerns raised are legitimate concerns and the types of things that we should talk about, I don't think that this is the point in the process at which we can really be considering those kinds of things. I mean, the zoning, all of Prosser is very clearly zoned at about this density, and all the lots that are built on are very similar to this, so I'm not sure how that argument merits. So I'm kind of going through all the possible arguments about why denying the easement abandonment makes sense, and I'm inclined to go with the staff recommendation.
Yeah, I had a good discussion with town staff on this one as well. First of all, from my experience, if the septic system is going to fail, it's going to impact the residents before it impacts the forest or anybody else. So, there's going to be a stopgap there. I also feel very strongly in the personal property rights, and I'm inclined to go with the staff recommendation as well, with the one additional note that clearly the letter also talked about fire and fuel reduction, and obviously that is also not the purview of the town of Truckee, just like the approval or disapproval of the septic system. But obviously we do want to encourage people to do proper fuel maintenance and allow our fire department to weigh in on that.
I agree. I think that was really well said. And we've had several of these come before us, and really, in order to have parity with all of the prior applicants who have have really been in line with what our requirements are. I'm having a difficult time reconciling a reason to decline this. I'm not seeing it. So I'm also inclined to go with staff recommendation.
Yeah, I don't really feel I have much more to add. I think it's been said already. If the utility companies indicated their willingness to go along with the abandonment, they didn't see an issue with it as well. I think looking at this and taking it at face value, I would find it hard to find reason to deny also, and I think I'd be comfortable with the staff recommendation on this. So I think with that, anyone care to make a motion?
I would move that we adopt Resolution 2019-14, approving the abandonment of the westernly 7 feet of a 15-foot wide public utility along Poppy Lane, and authorize the town manager to sign the indemnification agreement between the town of Truckee and Gary Obringer regarding the parcel.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
And the 10-day appeal period would, oh, I'm sorry, we don't have an appeal period.
It's not the planning commission.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, and thank you for everyone who came out to speak as well. Okay, we'll move on to item 7.2, which is a continuation from our last council meeting, staff report of the preliminary sustainability activities report and the 2020 renewable electricity goal process. And it looks like we have Nick and Erica queued up. And Jeff, do you want to say something?
Yeah, just a couple of overarching comments and some acknowledgments. First, 7.2 and 7.3 are kind of a package. We brought it to you last time and we ran out of time, but so we brought it back to you again because they're both highly interrelated. We were hoping to bring these two items to you prior to your first peek at the budget, because they have budget implications. We weren't able to do that, so you've already gotten a little bit of a preview on some of the flavor of some of these items because they do have budget implications. I'd like to really thank Nick and Erica and also Melanie and Jillian for really working this issue and really pushing internally. Nick and Erica have been thinking about this for quite a while, as have some of the rest of us in town, of kind of moving us quicker and faster and kind of into a little bit more robust sustainability efforts townwide. And I also want to acknowledge the department heads who eagerly dove into this by allowing their staff members to be on this committee. And it's not an inconsequential amount of time and effort, which translates into time and effort taken away from other things that have to get done. So that's impressive. I think it's important to recognize, and I think Nick and Erica will go into this, that sustainability is a very broad topic. You know, some would say it covers almost everything, but it certainly covers a great deal of what the town does. And because of that depth and breadth, we thought it was important to bring you that whole bit, and the table that's in your staff report that Nick will talk about really starts to get at that. It's not just about energy, although it's absolutely about energy and renewable energy, but it really, if we're going to reduce greenhouse gas footprint and do other important outcomes around sustainability, it has to do with land use and transit and housing and building codes and energy efficiency and all of those kind of things that in walkability and bicycles and all the things that we get involved in. So it's a big effort. It's a long-term effort, and it's one of those efforts you never actually succeed at. I've been involved in this. You never actually get it done, because when you finish one thing, you're on to the next. You're always moving toward a more sustainable opportunity, a more sustainable future. And I think it's important that the work in progress will continue and will continue to build momentum. We're very fortunate in having a general plan update and a climate action plan as part of that general plan update happening right now, because that's a big piece of this, is setting our plan and setting our policy for the future, and that's really where the big gains are going to be gained. At the same time, we want to move forward with anything and everything that we can do practically and affordably that's more of a project or something that would happen right now that isn't necessarily a long-term policy, that doesn't take years to happen but can happen quickly. And as you'll see when you do get your budget very soon, next couple of weeks, that we have put substantial amounts of dollars in some of these areas that Nick and Erica will talk about. Some of them brand new dollars, that is money we haven't spent in those areas too much in the past. And we actually did a little totaling up, and I think it was in your draft town manager budget staff report from last week. But over 5 years' time, we've calculated about $16 million of town dollars. Many of them, much of that general fund dollars, going into sustainability projects of some type. Now, these are all kinds of things, everything from sidewalk improvements to bike lanes to energy efficiency to renewable generation. It sort of covers the gamut. But that's a pretty impressive number, especially when you consider the amount of dollars in our budget that are not discretionary, which are a sizable amount. We have to spend it in certain areas because that's how the money comes in. And of the discretionary dollars, we're putting a lot of energy and effort into these efforts. So with that, I will turn it over to the experts.
Thanks, Jeff, for that intro. And Mayor and council members, I'm happy to be here to talk to you tonight about our sustainability activities, and I will then pass it off to Nick to talk about the 2020 renewable electricity discussion. So, like Jeff said, sustainability is not just about energy and emissions goals, but also really keeping in mind the community at large, and also looking at our equitable community engagement goal that was adopted along with the 2017 100% renewable goals. In particular, we are trying to keep in mind that we have we need to look at the community at large, which includes our often underrepresented and vulnerable populations. And if you look at the Venn diagram on the right, we can't just touch on anything that's purely beneficial for the environment or purely economical, but we really need to meet in the middle there in order for us to move on in a sustainable, equitable, and resilient fashion. So like Jeff mentioned, we have assembled a sustainability committee, and we are trying to, for the first time, have some coordinated efforts across the organization. So we have representatives from every department and nearly every division, and we have come together to identify the sectors that you see below as a group within our first committee meeting. So we've got land use, energy use, mobility and accessibility, waste reduction and recycling, outreach and equity, and resilience. And these are all sectors that we are currently doing work in, and will also be identifying what the next opportunities exist are, as well as how we can measure this and hold ourselves accountable and communicate that outward. So the next step would be diving deeper at what these opportunities are, what we're currently doing, and how we can communicate that outward as an organization through a dashboard. And like Jeff mentioned, these are all activities that we've been doing for a long time as an organization with the town. However, it hasn't always been in a concerted manner or communicated with the highlight of for sustainability goals. So this is something that we are really excited to be doing right now together. And Nick will now go over some of those activities that we've done before.
Thank you, Erica. So the committee's first real task was looking at what we have done to date. How do we quantify that? To figure out a bit of a baseline of work that the town has been doing over the years in, I don't want to say uncoordinated, but not looking at divisionally how things are relating to each other, but doing them just because they made sense. It's, if you're going to be upgrading lighting at Town Hall, might as well make sure that you're up to the current standards and making them as efficient as possible. So that was kind of the first task of the committee, is helping to identify this timeline of activities. So a few ones that I wanted to point out that I think are important are the 2009 study. So, I mean, obviously, going all the way back, I don't know when we really truly started the Keep Truckee Green program. I believe it was around the time when Nicole Dorr was hired in around 2006, and that was a sustainability action, whether knowingly or not, but dedicating a staff resource towards waste reduction. Plus, there's a lot more that she does, and there's a lot more that Erica does. But then looking at 2009, we took a town hall-wide focus on energy efficiency audit and looked at our facility here, what we could do to improve the function in a most efficient manner. And that study identified a whole host of work projects for Dan and his staff for facilities to upgrade ongoing. And as part of that, they received some grant dollars to implement. And then even beyond that, we're still having an energy efficiency focus in our facilities upgrades. Have you seen through Town Hall with our current remodel, many of those measures have carried forward now to keeping up to the current green building standards. And then in 2015 and 2016, council, previous council and planning commission took a proactive approach at looking to planning for climate change and how we as a community can address our emissions overall. And at that time, in 2015, there was a joint planning commission, town council meeting where Sierra Business Council, along with the local government commission, executive director, presented to that joint session on really the best practices across the state for how other jurisdictions are addressing climate change and incorporating that into their planning activities. And at that time, the previous town manager had mentioned the upcoming general plan update and how that might be an opportunity to incorporate climate policies to really embed the practice within the general plan itself. So along making it as part of doing business as usual as a jurisdiction. And the action from that, or the direction from that 2015 convening, was to develop the first baseline greenhouse gas inventory. And so that was using baseline year of 2008, along with the state protocols for kind of best available data that you can get. And then in 2016, that was brought back to council, the final report, and staff was directed to move forward with a re-inventory of more current data so that those two data points of 2008 and 2016 could be used in moving forward in our climate action planning. Now we know where we started, we know where we were 8 years later, and also at that time, the direction was given to continue with the next steps of incorporating climate action within the general plan update process. In 2017, real quick, pointing out the renewable, 100% renewable goals that were brought to council in November 2017. Staff took a little bit different approach than some of the other jurisdictions that we reached out to, including South Lake Tahoe and others, that we didn't want to just bring a resolution to council. Without a plan or understanding of the implications community-wide that might have. And so we reached out to several other of our agency partners, our special districts. As you remember, we had 7 or 8 of them that Jillian was able to interview with and discuss best practices with before, and they presented on kind of how, what they're doing and how these goals might affect them. So it was a good proactive approach that we took to identify those stakeholders that we would need to partner in achieving these goals, in addition to just setting that goal. The last piece there, the 2019. So this is our current status of activities that we're in the middle, beginning, middle of the general plan update process and identifying how climate policies fit into that framework. We've just kicked off the vulnerability assessment, which will help develop adaptation policies to be embedded within the general plan, specifically in the safety element to be compliant with SB 379, but also throughout where appropriate. Then the committee that Erica spoke of, which is, I think, a very exciting outcome of the town's current sustainability activities. It's something that we're obviously very passionate about. So I guess these are some of those activities that I mentioned are the current ongoing activities. You'll see in the next item, the energy efficiency and solar analysis that we've done for town-wide facilities. So that's directly addressing this 2020 goal, which we'll be touching on. And then everything that Erica's doing within Keep Truckee Green as far as waste reduction and outreach. And like I mentioned, it goes much beyond waste. I mean, if you think about it, some of the most impact that you can have on the community as far as sustainable activities and how you as a individual citizen can affect change and create impact is with your garbage and your daily activities of looking to reuse or to reduce at the very foremost. And it's a very tangible early touch point for behavior change towards more sustainable practices. So I think that's very important ongoing activity that we are focusing on. And then the staffing, like she mentioned, and Jeff had mentioned. So as you'll see in the proposed budget, half of my time will be allocated towards sustainability activities, along with Erica's time, some of Erica's time, Melanie's time, and Hillary's time as well. So that we're making a commitment to this, which as a staff member is very exciting. I mean, Jeff, myself, Erica, Jillian, others, we all have backgrounds rooted in this work, and in climate and sustainability, and we have the skills that we need. Now we have the allocation to really do good work for the town, and we're excited about seeing that move forward.
Okay.
Sure.
Before we move on to the next slide, I just wanted to reiterate what Nick mentioned about the outreach and education component, something that as part of the greater sustainability efforts that we're doing now, looking forward, that we haven't done necessarily in the past is expanding upon the kind of Keep Truckee Green brand and leveraging that as a platform for outreach into the community. And as part of the ongoing efforts of the general plan update, as well as our recent outreach that we've done within the community for Keep Truckee Green, it is also a priority for us to have bilingual outreach and really be touching all of the community.
That's a great point, and I'll go ahead and add on to that. So currently we have 2, and in the process of getting 3 contracted bilingual translators to be assisting us and working with a segment of the community that we have not previously reached very well throughout all of our general plan processes, and specifically our climate activities and through the vulnerability assessment. So that's another really exciting activity that we're doing currently. So this brings us to the real action item of this agenda item is, what do we do with the 2020 goal? So we set the goal, and it was self-imposed. It was not really what other jurisdictions were doing when we looked to some of the best practices from throughout the rest of the state and country. But it's something that we wanted to add in to put the onus on us and recognize our ability to be a leader in the community, if not the community at large, at least our special districts and our local agencies. And so I think that, coupled with the agency-focused presentation in 2017, we wanted to make sure that if we thought we could do it, then let's do it, and then we can kind of set that example for others to follow. At the time, the real backbone of what would have made this a very achievable goal was some ongoing discussions that we were having with the PUD regarding revitalizing their green rate program, which they had previously offered years ago, didn't really take root. They felt like some of the main issues were that there wasn't great outreach and momentum behind it. So that coupled with some key points that we were looking for, we felt like, yes, we can commit to moving this forward and use it as sort of a renewable energy credits way of accounting for our 100% electricity, knowing that we weren't actually getting 100% electricity, but it was moving the community closer by helping the PUD dig deeper into their portfolio for renewable purchases. That has since stalled, which is why we're left before us, because we realized that we, aside from that original understanding and and communications with the PUD, that we hadn't clearly defined the goal. What does it mean to meet 100% renewable electricity for town facilities by 2020? That's what we would like to have direction on. The boundaries could go anywhere from something similar to a green rate or purchasing RECs to a full-scale, every facility needs to be completely off the grid, self-generating and storage capability, so that we are self-sufficient and resilient in that way. Or maybe it's somewhere in the middle, but we don't know. So what we're requesting is to have direction from council to form a stakeholder group to help define what that means. So we would like to have a highly focused engagement process that we come up with the several alternatives for the 2020 definition, collect input from these stakeholders, and then bring back a recommendation to council relatively quickly so that can be incorporated into one of our important CIP projects that's before you in the proposed budget for the solar generation facilities. So I'll leave it there and open it for questions.
Just add 2 quick points. One, just to acknowledge that we believe this can be a fairly quick process. We don't think we have to open up yet another very large stakeholder process, but we do want to get some input, so that's why the suggestion. Secondly, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge some of the other sustainability activities that go on in town that I think are in the report, but maybe didn't get onto the slides. You know, we do a lot of work in stormwater, and Drew previously, and now Sarah and others are working in there, and that's a huge piece. Our work with the Watershed Council is a big piece in doing restoration projects. We've done a good bit in groundwater, even though we don't purvey it but we use it. And so we've had a hand in the sustainability aspects of our groundwater basin. We work with the Land Trust on open space purchases, not inconsequential. And there'll be some of that coming before you soon. And then, of course, the trails, bikes, and transit stuff that the dance shop does and does well, something the town has really taken on and it didn't do at the beginning, back in the early stages of the town. So those are all efforts that need to keep moving and part of this. And we just want to acknowledge that work is not inconsequential.
And also to preempt a question that we might get, where are the 20, 30, 40, 50 goals, and why aren't those being discussed now? And I think the immediate nature of the 2020 goal and the fact that we have 20 months left approximately is necessitating that conversation sooner. And we also think that those goals are much broader, need to have a full community process, and the general plan update process along with the GPAC and subcommittees will help define what those goals look like.
Okay, thank you, Erica, and thank you, Nick and Jeff. Good overview, and clearly a lot going on. So at this point, we'll open this up for any clarifying questions from council, and then we'll take it to public comment after that, and then bring it back.
I wanted to add a bit of context, since we went all the way back to 2006 on the history. It was council member and former mayor Beth Ingalls that was the driving force behind, hey, we really need to create the Keep Truckee Green program, primarily focused around recycling, and I believe paint recycling was a big piece of that. Kim, I think you were involved in setting that up. Yeah. So, but she definitely, really led the charge on that one and led to Nicole being hired. So, get our history right on this.
Thanks for that addition. I didn't know that. I'll make a note. So I think my only question is, I've had obviously a lot of conversations with multiple staff members about this, and I'm really interested in seeing some dashboards happen. So would that be part of the task of this subcommittee, is to look at dashboard options, or are we really just focusing on how to define the 2020 goal?
So this stakeholder group is looking at the 2020 facilities 100% electricity goal. The dashboards we are actually addressing at our third Sustainability Committee meeting next month, of taking this list of activities and literally trying to assign a metric to it and using that as a broad attempt at identifying what a dashboard would need to cover for us, so that then we can embark on our research task of looking at what is out there, including some of the ones that you have pointed in our direction, and others, looking for best practices in local government sustainability metrics tracking, if there's such a thing.
There is. Okay, great. And so this group would be tasked with coming up with a recommendation to bring to council, not just on specific facilities, but our overall policy, correct?
My understanding is this stakeholder group will be looking at a few alternatives that staff will be providing, along with some cost implications of what that looks like, because it's obviously much different if we're going to be purchasing RECs versus a full, each facility 100% offset and battery storage. So we will be bringing a few of those alternatives and discussing them at the stakeholder group to see which ones seem more workable and what make the most sense to define the goal. But ultimately the recommendation will be taking that feedback. The staff will be taking the feedback from that stakeholder group and making a recommendation to council. I don't anticipate having a stakeholder group come to consensus on the definition. I believe what we would want to see is they provide feedback and input to staff, and staff develops that recommendation, obviously rooted very deeply in that feedback.
It really is kind of a three-dimensional thing to look at. It's what are we defining it for now in terms of the dollars that we can commit versus what are we defining for the future, right? And what we'll be able to commit into the future.
Yeah, I think we may be getting a little too far afield on this stakeholder group. It's really intended to be kind of a quick, help us get a definition because we need it immediately, and that was really the key here. We have to remember all the stakeholder groups we have ongoing, which are going to be lasting over the next 2 years. We have the GPAC, we have the recently created subcommittee on climate action plan group. We're going to have community workshops undoubtedly on climate action planning surrounding all of that. So we've got a lot of processes in place to start to deal with 2030, 2040, the future, our big policies. We really just realized that we had this immediate goal, needed a quick, the quick hit. So this one, I see it as more like a definition group. Help us get a definition. We'll put something in the budget, and a year from now, it'll be happening.
Very focused then. Should not take long. Thank you.
Is this even more than one meeting? I mean, when do you imagine bringing this back?
Yeah, I would anticipate one meeting, hopefully.
All right. Yeah. Setting expectations. I like it.
Because ultimately we would want this in front of council before the May 16th budget workshop.
Okay, just a couple of questions. So just curious about the committee, the staff committee that's been formed. You're meeting monthly, and how many members? Sounds like you've got representation from across the board in terms of departments. Yeah.
Yeah, we are meeting monthly. Our meetings are once a month, and we have some kind of small homework assignments. And we anticipate breaking into working groups moving forward once we've identified tasks for the committee. But for right now, we're meeting as a whole group monthly, and we have, I believe, 13 of us, including Nick, Jeff, and myself.
Great. Okay. And then a logistical question in terms of the stakeholder group. Again, it sounds like a very compressed process. And what's the process for identifying the stakeholder group? And what do you have in mind in terms of the composition of that group?
I think, and Jeff can help me out on this, I think what I'm picturing is we definitely want to have a representative from the PUD to be able to give the perspective of achievable versus not on some, when we're getting into solar procurement questions and so forth, buyback rates. We want to include some of our 100% committee members that have been very active and encouraging in this process and have already done a lot of work, frankly. And I think we want to make sure that we get as many experts as we can, but also not making this a too large to manage, I guess. So we would have most likely Dan involved in this, since he's looking at it from what's feasible on the facilities construction side, and then potentially a couple of others, but I would picture maybe around 5 or 6 or so members.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? At this point, we'll open that up to public comment. If there's any public comment, please step to the podium and you'll have 3 minutes to speak, state your name, and also remember to fill out a speaker card. Give it to Judy Price in the back there.
Hi, am I on?
Yeah,
Great.
You're on.
Hi, my name is Mike Witherspoon. I'm a concerned citizen. I want to say thanks to the council and the town for prioritizing the environment and budgeting for renewable energy. That's awesome. It really is. I've got a personal belief that we should be maximizing the opportunities afforded by the ever-improving economics of turning sunshine into human usable energy. I'd like to see more and more of that. That's just a personal belief. As for the approaches for defining the 2020 goal, I actually believe the town staff, from what I've seen, you guys have the capability to throw a recommendation down. You just haven't necessarily thrown your stake in, and you'd like some external help. That's great. If you'd like more community inclusive process, I agree to setting a really near-term timeline. Sounds like May 16th is a budget deadline. We need to get that done, so let's get it done. Make your stakeholders, grab your stakeholders, identify them, whether they're concerned citizens or members of the government currently. But yeah, let's get this done. So it's my little motivator speech.
Thank you, Mike. Any other public comment on this?
Hello, my name is Nikki Caravelli. I love this. All y'all are amazing people. I would just encourage for the committee or the outreach that you consider talking to some of the business community or thinking about partnerships that could happen with collaborative solar procurement. For instance, if the hospital had the ability to buy a solar and they wanted to do it immediately, maybe if they did that with the town of Truckee, it would make things more efficient and affordable for everybody. So just considering partnerships with the business community. I don't know if that's already been considered or falls in a different realm, but in general, for our 2020 goal and beyond, I think that's important.
Thank you, Nikki. Any more public comment? Okay, seeing none, we will close public comment and bring this back to council for deliberation, discussion, recommendation. Who'd like to start?
I'll second Nikki. All y'all are great. I just really want to give kudos to this list. It's comprehensive. It's impressive. I really particularly love how you include land use and mobility and waste and recycling and watershed, because that really is all incredibly impactful to our actual goal, which is greenhouse gas emission reductions. I love talking about sustainability and solar, but ultimately what we need to do is reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And that's what this is focused on. And you guys, I think, are doing fantastic. I think the areas that we've really been focusing on lately are also the areas that we are modeling for our community. And ultimately what I'd like to see is just also, like Nikki said, engagement of the community, not just the business, but also the other special districts, because ultimately what I'd like to see is where they land on this as well, because while the town can have a huge impact, what we really need is a community response to this. But this is the beginning of it. So kudos to you. And ideally, whatever we choose to move forward with on this recommendation, that we could also continue to evolve it as our priorities change and as our budgets change and as as new technologies change, that this is a snapshot in time, and to achieve this specific goal, but that we're always keeping that long-range goal in mind.
Yeah, I completely agree. It makes perfect sense. I think this is a great, not necessarily a starting place, but a place to continue and to be able to really focus in for the next 20 months. How can we make sure that we achieve that, and then keeping on moving forward. So I'm highly in favor of getting a group together and really focusing down and coming back with what the definition of success might look like for 2020.
Absolutely, full steam ahead. I think that I hear Mike on saying, let's not overcomplicate this. Like if we had to pick something right now, it'd probably work pretty well. And I think that we're all aligned that that the picking of it does have implications for how we look at 2030 and how we have these larger conversations. So we obviously want to be on very solid ground. But I don't think that, I do want to caution us against looking at the sort of goal definition and the economic feasibility question. I think those are a little bit separate. I think the real question is if the goal was adopted not just by the town, but by all of our partner districts, by all of our, our private residents, et cetera, could that same definition be used all the way up that chain? And would it actually achieve the goal? Would it actually achieve the goal of resulting in, hey, we're using this electricity, but there are no fossil fuels being generated? And so what's the first step that the town can take that if those steps were continued, we have a very clear objective metric. I think we got it. I guess I'm not feeling like it's going to be super useful to get into the various options and peaks because again, as soon as you start unpacking this, there's lots of little nuances. But I think that principle I feel really strongly about. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think the process of stepping back and really looking at everything, taking an inventory of what our town has done over the years is extremely enlightening and beneficial and impressive. So I thought that was terrific. And I also think that, the approach of what it does is it helps to highlight I think the fact that it's an all of the above kind of approach that is ultimately going to get us to our goal, or all of the goals for 2020, 2030, and 40 and beyond. So, I think the town has a real role to play in terms of leadership on this issue, on the issue of 2020 certainly, and then beyond. So I support the recommendation. I agree. Let's not make this overly complicated. Even if all failed and we weren't able to pull together the committee, we've got the committee in-house of 13 from various departments who I think could come up with the definition. So I think, let's move forward and get it done. And with that, Do we need to vote on this, or are you? This is more of an input.
I think we're pretty clear.
Okay.
Full steam ahead. I've heard if that works, we're on it.
Yep. Okay, and we've got a time fuse on it as well. So, all right. Thank you for the comments as well. With that, we are ready for item 7.3, which is a continuation of the town facilities energy efficiency and renewables report. And Nick and Jillian, looks like you're going to be walking us through this.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I will be starting the presentation on the Town Facilities Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Report. And then we have our consultant here who will be getting into all the details, and he can answer your more specific questions because this is not an area where I have extensive expertise, but I'll be providing a bit of a summary and some context. So to start, I have a brief timeline that includes some of the activities and dates that Nick already mentioned. So as you heard, we did a good amount of energy efficiency work between 2009 and 2012 after an energy efficiency study that the town completed, and we received $90,000 worth of grants to complete most of that work. In 2016, the town had consultants who did a walkthrough audit and solar feasibility study within a design build model. At that point, the town decided that it did not want to pursue a design build approach to energy efficiency and renewable generation. And so at that point, it stepped back from that project and leads us to where we are today, where we have a separate consultant doing the feasibility study, and then we're going to determine what projects we implement from there. In 2017, the town adopted the 100% renewable energy and electricity goals that you've heard about, as well as the equitable community engagement goal. In 2018, the town was approached by the seed fund, and the town agreed to go through the first stage of the seed fund process, which was conducting a solar pre-screen assessment. We received that pre-screen assessment from them in about November, and that study informed the work that ARC Alternatives did in terms of figuring out renewable generation at town facilities. And then the final date on here is in 2018, in about September, the town retained ARC Alternatives, who did the energy efficiency audit and renewable energy planning work that is brought to you today. So as a brief summary, the ARC Alternatives team found almost $300,000 worth of recommended energy efficiency projects. Some of these projects are included in the next year's budget that you guys are in the process of reviewing right now. The board at the PUD approved $60,000, up to $60,000 worth of incentives at their last board meeting last week. So that reduces the amount of money that the town will put towards these projects and reduces the payback period for these projects. So we're excited to go ahead with those. On the solar side, ARC was instructed to review the seed pre-assessment screening that they conducted and figure out how that looked. And they were also instructed to model their systems to achieve 100% offset at the facility. So that's where their models are coming from in their study. They found up to $4.8 million worth of potential solar generation projects. As we define the 2020 goal, it will significantly influence what projects the town decides to take on in the coming years. So with that, I'm going to invite Russell Driver up to present in more detail about the Strategic Energy Report.
While Russell's walking up there, just one very large, obvious overarching comment and then a very small comment. The overarching one is, you always want to do your efficiency first before you start into solar generation or whatever else. The electron not used is the cheap one, the easy one, and the one we should always be looking to. We have the luxury of having, actually, with the exception of the depot, some pretty new buildings. And so the easy stuff we've sort of did. The problem is the timing of a couple of the new buildings, the town hall remodel to some degree, the courtyard for sure, the existing courtyard, we're kind of just pre a lot of the technologies and a lot of the cost reductions in some of those technologies that we probably would have been able to do from the beginning. Because the other thing I've always learned is you want to do it, if you can do it from the beginning, it's going to be better, less expensive, more integrated into the structure and into the building, which I'm sure our consultant knows a lot more about than I do. But so just a couple of comments about kind of where we are. So this is the next layer of not quite low-hanging fruit.
Okay, thank you. And good evening, and I'm going to start with an apology. I'm feeling a little under the weather, so if I have to pause to get my voice back now and again, please bear with me. So first slide, please. Thank you. So I'm going to run through our scope really quickly. The staff did a good job with that overview, so I won't spend too much time there. We benchmarked all the facilities, so we'll walk through benchmarking in terms of energy use on a normalized per square foot kind of basis, go through the energy efficiency projects we identified, and then talk about the renewables options, and then I'll be happy to answer whatever questions you have. So our scope, next slide. We were brought in 2018 to look at sort of a comprehensive view of energy at town facilities, looking at efficiency and solar. We went through sort of in two phases, first with a walkthrough level audit, if you will, and then we went back around and conducted what's equivalent to an ASHRAE level 2, if anyone's familiar with that term, audit on the key facilities where we wanted to go deeper in identifying what the measures and the savings would look like. And then on the renewable side, we didn't do a ground up feasibility study. We did build our analysis on what was done in the SEED report, and I'll talk in more detail about our opinions about all that. So starting with the benchmarking, I think this is sort of an interesting heat map chart because there are a couple things that jump off the page. Animal shelter in particular has pretty high utilization for both electricity and gas, and that is primarily because of the operation of the facility. Even though it's new, the air handler has to run a lot of air exchanges are required out there, and so you see that on both the gas and electricity side. So it's a new facility, it's got new equipment. We didn't frankly find a lot of measures to identify in there, but it's almost like a hospital setting in there, and so that's a challenge as far as that goes. And then the other one that really jumps out was the train depot lobby meter, and it's a little tiny meter, thankfully, but the snow melt system on the roof was left on for some number of years. And so just flipping it off. And so I'd expect if we relooked at these benchmarks with new data, that's all green now would be my guess. So, these things happen. But
so we pay the big bucks for it.
I mean, it looks worse than it is because it was a small meter, so I don't think it was that much energy. But that was one of the funny things that we found at any rate. So those are the benchmarks, and again, we do that at the outset to help us focus on where issues might be, and clearly in the case of that little train depot meter, it pointed us pretty quickly to a particular issue. Okay, next slide. On to the energy efficiency project. So, in summary, and I believe you all have had access to our more detailed report and had a chance to review it, and there's a lot more detail in there, but we did identify about $300,000 worth of recommended projects, and the table here breaks it down by facility and by measure. And you'll see that it's a lot of lighting with some HVAC and some controls mixed in. The not recommended projects are $365,000 worth of those. Almost $300,000, or about $300,000 of it, is I believe heat pump equipment here at this facility that staff are in the process of sort of changing out as part of capital replacement and long-term maintenance anyway, and so that's a reason why that all fell out, and why the not recommended looks as large as it does. I mean, frankly, they had very long paybacks and they're getting dealt with as a capital replacement issue in the long term anyway. And I do want to echo a theme I think you've been hearing tonight already, that the town staff and Dan's team have been doing a really good job as they do maintenance, doing upgrades. So we weren't finding a lot of T12 light bulbs around and, crazy things going on. So, that's really good news, but, it makes the opportunity a little bit smaller because they're doing a great job. So, but that's a really good thing and a very cost-effective way to do business. Okay, so moving on to solar, we looked at both net energy meter opportunities and a wholesale sort of on the utility side of the meter opportunity. And net energy metering is what you'd all be more familiar with in terms of residential solar and small commercial solar. So that would be on your property, on your side of the meter. And the net energy metering allows you to essentially push energy out onto your utilities grid in lieu of having a battery or something, because there are going to be times of the day and the year where you're producing more energy than you're using. So that was also a focus of the SEED program, and they identified, I think, about 1.4 megawatts of power in their study. The PUD program is a pretty basic one for net energy metering. They essentially give you full retail credit for the kilowatt hours that you export. They account for it in a very simple way. The rate structure doesn't have any time of use differences. So it's all pretty straightforward and easy to model. So those are the NEM opportunities, and let's go to the next slide, please. So building on the SEED report, we did our own economic analysis because we felt it was prudent to be more conservative with our modeling assumptions in terms of both system production on the solar side and construction costs. And that's because of the unique challenges of your mountain environment, sort of combined with the fact that I think it's also a challenging procurement environment. There isn't a really robust solar industry here locally, camped out at your doorstep. And all of those things drive cost a little bit. So snow loads, fewer light hours because of some of the mountain conditions and valley conditions and those sorts of things, and construction costs. So we, in our report, had a whole series of different scenarios we looked at. On this page, we just have the conservative one, sort of the worst case scenario, where we're trying to set a benchmark where we think in a real procurement, you're going to do better than this on pricing. We would hope so. And so these numbers do reflect that kind of conservative approach. And what you can see here, and we didn't do a full sort of cash flow analysis on all the projects, but they all do pay for themselves within the system's expected useful life. The simple paybacks on them are lengthy, though. And that is primarily due to the fact that the power being supplied by the Public Utilities District is low cost. And your construction costs are likely to be a little higher than they would be like in the Central Valley. But they're sort of viable projects just the same. Now, these numbers, the other caveat I wanted to present, assume more or less a cash purchase. These aren't financed. We didn't assume that there's any debt service costs in here yet. So depending on, as we get closer to real projects and developing a financing plan, we may have to fold that in and change these numbers depending on how these projects would be paid for. We listed in this table what we felt a good set of prioritization would be for these projects based on the life cycle benefit that the project would bring to the town and size. So it's a little squishier than just ranking the benefit. And that's because Town Hall in particular is a big site and I think needs to be in the portfolio if you're going to get vendor interest in a project. But it is on the large commercial rate structure for the PUD. And so the energy you're buying from them is cheaper. And so it's not quite as an attractive a project. But if you think about it from a portfolio perspective, that might be a balance that makes sense to do the first two or three, depending on the capital funds that you have at your disposal. So that's our proposed implementation strategy in the short run, is to really think about doing 2 or 3 of these projects. The other ones on the list are quite small. So we would think if you went out with a procurement, we would put in an RFP all of the projects and see what comes in. And if it does come in cheaper than what we're projecting, then maybe there's an opportunity to do more solar or not use all of that budget, depending. So that's what we think on the NEM projects. That there's some good opportunities there. The next slide is on the wholesale type of project, and this is a great deal more complicated in part because given that you have a small public utilities district that you partner with, they don't have a lot of sort of well-developed programs out there. It's not like working with PG&E or Southern California Edison on a project like this where they have a program, and you read the rules and you know how to develop a project under it. So something would have to be negotiated directly with the PUD. They've expressed some interest, a willingness to work with the town. But when we started digging into the economics, just as a threshold go, no go kind of consideration, and it's on the slide here, they procure their energy at a pretty low cost, and they pay very little on transmission, which was interesting for us as an energy consultant here, because that's very different from the other utilities we work with. And it has to do with a lot of the peak here in the Truckee area not being coincident with peaks elsewhere. So the big utility or power producers they're buying from are trying to unload energy when you need it. And so, again, great for all of you guys right now in the current condition, but it is driving costs down. So it makes it very hard to compete with in terms of a local project economically. So anyway, what we laid out here is our expectation is we've been seeing projects in the 3 to 5 megawatt range, which would be very large, ground mount systems, coming in at anywhere from 6 to 8 cents a kilowatt hour, maybe at the higher end of that range up here again because we're in the mountains. But their all-in cost or value to the PUD for that energy is probably 3.5, 4.5 cents. So, a deal that could still be done, but that's a political decision more than an economic one. So we're just trying to bring some of those facts to light for context in pursuing that. It would be a lengthy process one way or the other. You would have to, negotiate the terms of such an agreement with PUD. You would have to find the land either yourselves or with a partner agency. There just would be a lot of steps to making a project like that happen. Okay, so that's the wholesale option. So in conclusion, I'll finish up real quick here, I promise. What we recommended on the energy efficiency is to pursue the lighting measures immediately because of the available incentives, and you've already heard how PUD acted to make those available for you, and then to roll out the rest of the projects sort of in a phased fashion, with HVAC sort of last. Those are more capital intensive and they have longer paybacks anyway. So I think that's all I need to say about that because we've talked about incentives quite a bit. And then lastly, final slide, on the solar, at this time we're not recommending a near-term pursuit of the larger system and the wholesale option, though it's certainly a possibility in the long term. But the NEM projects look promising, in that the town should consider implementing a portfolio of projects. There is a fair amount of work to put together a request for proposals to get into the procurement process for those systems. One of our concerns technically is making sure that sufficient due diligence is done on those projects prior to the specifications and RFP going out, because of the unique conditions here. You've got snow loads to deal with and a whole bunch of things. And so some of the systems identified in the SEED report, and we concur, generally speaking, with the locations they'd identified as being reasonable, but they have a mix of roof-mounted projects and carport projects. And so there just are some technical issues around geotechnical conditions, thaw and frost kinds of things, and structural issues with with snow load on the buildings to confirm as part of an RFP process that were not in our scope right now, but that we'd strongly recommend get tied up as part of a procurement. In terms of going forward, the town does have a couple options in front of them, and the seed procurement is certainly one of them. The big advantage to the seed approach is that they're likely to attract more competition by bundling. I personally worked with the seed people back in Alameda County when they did one a couple of years ago for, I think, 40 megawatts of power across 17 different agencies, and it was 180 sites. So the Optiny folks and my firm partnered to do that work. They only receive bids on a third or a quarter of the sites. And so the bundling of how that works has to be addressed very carefully. But they got a lot of interest for the sites that did get bid on. It was pretty remarkable. But it takes a little while. The other benefit is it's sort of free to the town in terms of the support of that procurement process. You could lead your own procurement with consultant assistance from someone like us or someone else. It would go faster. I think you would get better attention to your specific needs. Some of these concerns we have technically that I've been talking about, I think would be better addressed than going in with a group of people. But you would incur some costs to do that. So those are our thoughts about solar, and I think that concludes my prepared remarks, and I would be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Russell, and thanks for coming back.
Oh, you're welcome, of course.
So I just have one more slide for you, and then we can get into all of the many questions you probably have. So our request from you tonight is pretty simple. Just accept the results of the strategic energy plan in front of you and use them to inform the decisions you make through the budget process. All of the decisions coming out of this will be in the budget process itself. So with that, questions?
All right, thanks, Jillian, and thanks, Nick, as well. All right, with that, we'll open this up for any clarifying questions from council.
I think I just have one for right now. I remember in the budget workshop there was a potential option to have a 1% debt servicing or 1% borrowing towards energy efficiency or solar. Is that something that can be utilized through? I mean, the seed option, just from this information, doesn't sound like it's hugely appealing if the pricing's not going to be better and it's going to take longer and it's going to be a little bit more cumbersome. But if that were something we were going to be considering, can we collaborate? I'm not sure who I'm asking. Can we collaborate that with that potential 1% debt servicing and or with any possible grant funding? Is that all interconnected?
That's a great question. So yes, the 1% CEC program, I'll have Jillian comment on that. That is an option that the town could choose to finance this project. Many of these projects are financed, much like the seed fund would be as well. The difference is then that's wholly our own process. That's with the CEC program. It's not coupled with other regional districts that are looking at similar projects.
Yeah, so just a few more details on the 1% loan. So they're run through the California Energy Commission, and they can cover a wide variety of energy efficiency and renewable generation projects. You can't bundle projects. It's only one project at a time. So we would anticipate using the loan for the solar procurement because it's much more expensive than the energy efficiency projects that are on the table. One factor to consider is that the loans have to have a 17-year simple payback period, so the town would still be putting some money towards the projects to lower the payback of the loan amount. If we went for a project like the solar project on the courtyard, the loan would cover about 80% of the cost of that project. So we think that the application process is fairly quick, 2 to 3 months, and we would absolutely look into that possibility if you all decide to pursue some solar procurement in the coming years.
And that would, the 80% that the town would need to cover, roughly, the roughly 20%, that'd be just under $300,000 or so. And so what that would look like then in our budget would be, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, these loans do cover design planning as well. So already with what is proposed in the budget, the solar for the courtyard is rolled into the whole sum is covered under fiscal year 1920, when in actuality the construction costs would likely fall into 2020-21 fiscal year. So this would be I guess a budget reduction down to that couple $100,000 design and planning for 1920, and then it'd be a debt service, right, ongoing, if that were the consideration.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I'm going to jump in before Anna really dives in. I wanted to actually just zooming away from the solar and kind of the bulk of it a little bit, although I'm super interested. But Dan, I just wanted to ask about the exterior lighting. I think, as many of you know, dark skies, light pollution has become a bit of a hobby and maybe verging on obsession in some ways. But as I've geeked out on that, the questions I had raised to you, I just want you to kind of answer these for the council, is how much are we going to look at putting motion sensors on outdoor lights and town facilities so that they're not on a lot of the time? Do you have a process for considering just eliminating lights, right? We don't need to pay to run them or even maintain them. And then the third piece of it that I was actually very surprised to learn through my own research is that the color of the lighting there's energy implications, but it's not as much of an energy question as a public, how pleasant is it and how little light pollution does it cause? But the warmer and more closer to a candle light the color of light is, the less of an impact it has on our night vision and our ability to see the night sky. So 3 kind of topics that I hope you could just touch on for us.
Sure. So as it relates to exterior lighting, there's 2 basic categories of exterior lighting that the town owns and operates. One I would describe as street and intersection lighting that's out there in Brickletown, as an example, some key intersections around town. There's some that's being proposed to be added as a part of the Envision DPR project. So that's one category. The second category are, parking lots like here at Town Hall. We've got 7 different facilities where we have parking lots and varying degrees of exterior lighting. So I do think that it would be appropriate as part of the energy reduction efforts that we want to put forward would be to review definitely the lighting, where it's located and the necessity of it at each of the town facilities. I think it's also appropriate to review that for the street lighting that we have. I would say that the town's approach to street lighting has erred on the side of too little as opposed to too much, I think, has been the general philosophy. The Brickletown project, as an example, there was a discussion of, do we put sidewalk lights every 50 to 100 feet the length of the project, or do we just light the crosswalks? And in that example, we lit the crosswalks, and then there was a plaza that we added some lighting to. That's the same strategy for the Envision DPR corridor. So I'm doubtful that in the street lighting category, there's much out there that we would come back and recommend be eliminated. Also in the street light category, there's some of the street lights that are LED, not many, a handful. Most of them are older technology, so to the extent that we would be replacing those street lights with LED technology, that bleeds over into the color of the light. And I think the term is the Kelvin Kelvin range. And the higher the number, the whiter and more harsh the light is, the lower the number, the warmer that it is. So what we've been doing so in the rail yard project, as an example, we specified those lights to be 3,000 Kelvin, which is less than the what you see at some of the other locations, like at the Courtyard and the animal shelter, which are more like 5,000 to 6,000 Kelvin. So on the color of the light question, any place where we're going to be replacing ballasts to install LED lighting, it absolutely makes sense to put the right color in. We've got another series of lights that are scattered about that are LED lights, so they're the higher efficiency, but they're the brighter color. So, there'd be a question there of, is it worth the investment? You wouldn't necessarily be seeing an energy efficiency improvement. You'd just be seeing a change to the color of the light, and is that worth the investment now, or is that something that is targeted so when regular maintenance activity require that to be replaced, we do it at that point in time. And then as it relates to eliminating lighting on existing facilities, I think that should be a case-by-case evaluation that looks at how the facility is used, particularly at nighttime, and it really looks at it by season and by function. So our Courtyard, as an example of that, in the wintertime, we've got a 24/7 operation, lots of people in and out. Having exterior lighting, it's part of the operational need of the facility. Summertime, not so much. So it gets into, is it okay to have the site completely dark, or to have some very limited lighting to get you to and from buildings? So I think those would be the types of considerations that should be looked at a little more closely as part of a project design that was focused on lighting modifications at different facilities and on the street lights that we have.
Thank you for walking through that. I really appreciate it. I hope fellow council members at least got a little value out of that. So it's all part of the big project.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question? Can you not have the LED lighting in the right color scheme? Are you limited on the coloring?
There's more options than there used to be. I think when LED technology was first coming out, it tended to be the brighter lights, and I think as this issue of the light color has become of more interest nationally, there's more options available than there used to be.
Okay. Thanks.
I can totally geek out with you on lighting if you want. Okay, shielded, downward light only, photocells so that it only comes on when it's dark out, 50% or dimming with a motion sensor. Let's just do it. Okay, on all the lights. Yep. I do have a couple questions for Russell. If you, it looks like the vast majority of these upgrades are going to be electric based. What are the gas based upgrades, and what's the value of the savings there about?
That's a good question. I don't know if I actually know off the top of my head. Let me check out the measure list real quickly.
Okay. And while you're looking that up, this probably off the top of your head, your standard solar array now, what kind of lifespan do you expect from it?
Minimum 25. We model 25 on them. The vendors will tell you 30 or 35, and it's that's not an unreasonable expectation, but that's a sort of a warranty
the panels
contract.
Themselves, but the inverter's probably
half that.
Half that, exactly.
Yeah.
So you have to
12.
Plan in the amount of money to be able to replace that midway through.
We typically require an extended 20-year replacement warranty for the inverters, which most manufacturers offer, and so you can bundle that into the capital project cost up front and not have to do a capital replacement halfway
That's a
through.
good idea.
Thank you.
So the savings to investment ratio on most of those solar projects is going to be a little less than, right around 1, a little bit more for the
For the town.
29-year ones
Yeah,
and a
and
little
so-
bit less for the,
Yeah, in like for school districts, again, a school district in the Central Valley, it's well above 2, but it's just
Must be
much
nice.
thinner
Yeah.
down here, up here.
yeah, we, because we do have some unusual circumstances, particularly with snow shedding, snow load, snow buildup underneath the panels.
Yeah, we looked, someone had done a report on a ground mount system, a sizable ground mount system that was done by maybe the sanitary district. And there were real life production impacts that you wouldn't see just modeling it in one of the industry standard models. So that we took that and ratcheted down all the the output of the solar in our modeling to try to make it a little more conservative.
Okay. All right, so back to the gas versus the electricity.
The only measure we have on here is HVAC replacement.
Mhm.
So that's the only one that affects gas at all.
Okay.
It's the efficiency of the burner and the heater. So everything else is electric on the recommended list.
The lights, the pumps, the,
It's really just lighting and controls on the recommended list. Yeah, and then some HVAC, some limited HVAC.
great, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Russell, a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
You talked about the numbers, at least the cost side, maybe all the numbers being very conservative. How much more conservative? I mean, if you were to look at more of a middle of the road approach, what kind of percentage impact might there be on the numbers, on the cost?
With the numbers we used for this analysis were a quarter, maybe a little bit more than
25%.
Yeah, than what we're seeing in current procurements. We lead procurements all the time, but they're much more straightforward, honestly. So we added that on, without doing a bottom up build up. But yeah, that's
so market pricing today roughly 25% less than what you've modeled. Okay. Okay. And then I don't know if maybe a question for staff and or Russell. Are there other incentives out there at a state level? Any other programs, federal, that might help in terms of offsetting cost procurement of solar systems that we're aware of?
Like I'd already mentioned, the financing option is the one that we're most aware of. As far as any other statewide incentives, I mean, I think we're many years beyond the state solar incentives.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
The only thing that's still out there is the federal investment tax credit, but you can only take advantage of that through a power purchase agreement, which may not make sense for other reasons.
Okay.
And then it drops from 30% to 20% at the end of 2019 as well. So that's sort of slipping away.
Okay. And then on the option, the debt service or financing option, did you say there's a 17-year term? That's the maximum term?
Right. So the loan amount has to have a 17-year payback. Doesn't mean the project has to have a 17-year payback. But the loan amount has to.
The loan amount, whatever would be borrowed would have to be paid back in 17 years.
The financing could be for up to 20 years.
Okay.
It means that the project has to have a payback. So in the table that you see in the report, they're providing paybacks between 21 and 29 years.
I got it. Okay.
On these projects.
Yeah, they don't want to fund projects that have terrible paybacks. They want to make
Right.
sure that their money is going towards something that's being achieved sooner.
Okay.
It's similar to a match funding requirement like we have on some of our other grant opportunities.
So loan term 20 years, the payback we're talking about. Okay.
And the intention with those loans is that you can pay the loan amount by the savings you're receiving.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's also tied to that time frame.
Okay. Great. All right. That's all you have.
I'm kind of noticing that none of the projects have a 17-year payback. They're all 21, 29. So would we even be able to
Correct.
qualify for that?
So what we would do is we'd treat it similar to some of our grant scenarios that require match funding. For example, the NSA QMD grant that we received for the electric vehicle for Town Hall and the 3 charging stations that will be installed out front. They needed to see a certain cost effectiveness. Theirs was measured in pounds per dollar of the grant funding you're requesting. In our project, we had to buy down a lot, over 50% of the project cost to receive the grant funding because they needed to have that threshold for their dollars that it's effective towards reducing the emissions that it's saying is going to reduce. So this is similar to that, to where we would buy down to get to that 17-year payback. So it'd be a down payment, I guess.
Like our down payment.
Yeah.
Well, kind of piggybacking off that question, I mean, if our system costs are very conservative, maybe 20-25% above market, then would that, if we're looking at what market is and do an analysis or model it that way, then seems like that payback period would come down, right?
Yes.
We might hit the 17 years.
Yep.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity, given the quick turnaround on those CEC loan applications.
Mm-hmm.
If we have good intelligence on how much capacity is left in the loan program, to apply at the right point in time, relative to the procurement, because we might have a much better indication of where the pricing is going to come in, and then be able to submit a loan with a better number on it. And we could be at 17.
Okay.
Or under at that point.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, then we'll open this up for public comment. Any public comment? And if so, I think you all know the rules. 3 minutes, state your name.
Deirdre Henderson, I'm here as co-chair of the 100% Renewable Committee in Truckee. So we were the group that brought the seed fund opportunity to the town, as well as to all of the other service districts. And the seed fund process was that they do a pre-screen, which is the grossest analysis done only on the basis of mapping and satellite imagery and so forth. They did not do any on-site evaluation. The pre-screen is just to determine whether you want to go to the next step, also no cost attached to it, which is to have them come and do a more thorough analysis and a more thorough workup. So when I look at this report and I look at the pre-screen, I wonder if we really are not having apples to apples analyses here. So I would caution you not to conclude that the seed fund is not a good opportunity for the town. I have no brief for the seed fund. I just think that to abandon that opportunity on the basis of this report would not be a good idea. I think we lose nothing by going ahead with second stage with the seed fund and seeing where we'll be. With respect to the collaborative RFP, again, we would not have any costs in connection with doing that, but they are now working we are their third regional project, and it's all in the Sierras. So I would expect that their analysis and that all of the other towns and projects would be in a similar climate. So I think that they would have to take all of those things into account. So I think we need to have a further discussion with the seed fund, and my recommendation would be let's go ahead with the second stage, and at least we have, at a minimum, a second opinion. I also like the idea that it looks like there will be some other districts that will participate in this. We're not absolutely certain, but they've gone through pre-screening or are going to go through pre-screening. Some, I think one at least, has gone on to the next stage. I like the idea that we would be in a project with other service districts. I think the more we can try to work together, the better off we are. We're establishing a good precedent. So those were my comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Deirdre.
I'm
a little bit concerned that it sounds like two people with colds have been at this podium, and I want to get my Lysol out, no offense. Erin Delafontaine, co-chair of the 100% Renewable Group. I concur with everything Deirdre just said. Also, I should say GPAC member. And I want to add to this discussion that specifically to the wholesale option, I want to encourage staff and council to dig deeper on that possibility. My understanding from looking at the reports from the Truckee Donner PUD is that our costs are actually, as a community, our energy costs across the entire portfolio are actually 7 cents a kilowatt hour, not 3 to 4 cents. I think that number sounds very similar to the non-firm procurement rate, which is basically the lowest possible wholesale rate out there that they could obtain energy for. So for another reason, I would encourage the town to look into these options a little bit more deeply and see what opportunities there might be. I think the PUD, my understanding from involvement with or discussions with Blake Tresson, I think he's the director of the Truckee Sanitary District, and they already, as most of you probably know, have a very sizable solar installation. That wholesale rate was a negotiated rate, somewhere in the area of about 6 cents per kilowatt hour. That was quite a while ago, but I've heard that number come up recently in conversations with the Seed Fund Group and Optany. So. I also see a great opportunity there to kind of touch on this 2020 goal of reaching that not only through doing a project such as this, but partnering with the Truckee Sanitary Agency and possibly airport. Both of those agencies have expressed interest in some kind of a in front of the meter, wholesale, whatever you want to call it, collaborative solar opportunity. And as we all know, they all share property borders. I didn't say that right, but you know what I mean. And we have this huge, it's right here, this big wide open space with tons of sun, which is not easy to come by in our community. So I just want to put that out there. I want to take this opportunity, because I didn't want to get up here twice, and commend staff for their new sustainability committee. I think that is wonderful and goes right in line with everything our group is trying to push forward on. Energy efficiency, huge. What you guys have done, great work. I didn't dig deep into that report. That is not my specialty, but it sure seemed to me that you've done some amazing things, and those things should be continued. I do want to put in another plug for a true, oh shoot, I'm out of time. So I'm going to say this really quick. A true climate action plan that will take all of those efforts and quantify them. It would go right in hand with a dashboard. We need to know what all those efforts get us in terms of greenhouse gas reductions. We need to know where the gaps are. We need to know what other opportunities we need to be pursuing. All of that needs to be part of the general plan update. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin.
Hi. Mike Witherspoon again. 3 minutes. Let's do it. Actually, really just have a couple comments. First one would be on the wholesale option. And I'd like to encourage everyone as we look at this. We had one bullet point that it requires 10 acres of cleared land. I'd like to put it to everyone, that's 10 acres of dead land, right? We already use a lot of land for our human consumption. Our roofs are unused. So that cost, while you can get a hard dollar cost, we have a lot of land here at the airport. Why would we take that and use it for solar when we already have all these rooftops available? So that's my comment to everyone. On the wholesale option. On the procurement processes, fast is good, especially on urgent items. And I do believe climate change and sustainable energy is an urgent item. If there's efficiencies to be gained by going through seed, absolutely do that. But if you're going to lose a year, 2 years, how long is too long? Something I'd consider us, or have us all consider. I'm going to, my last one, as a business owner. If you guys can get a 1% loan in 17 years, get it. I am seriously envious of the town's capability to borrow, and you have a revenue stream in your savings. This is a no-brainer, right? That's how you obtain this. I would love to be able to get a 1% loan on the solar installation I'm going to be doing at my house. I envy your financial position and ability to borrow. That's my last comment.
Thank you, Mike.
Nikki Caravelli again. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. I found those really valuable in this report and all the work that's been done so far on this. A quick comment on the seed fund. Speaking from the region-wide perspective, I think a lot of other local agencies throughout the Sierra Nevada would benefit from Truckee's participation because they might not be able to do their solar projects if other agencies like Truckee don't participate. Just one thought. Secondly, this might be a little bit outside of the context of the electricity goal or whatever. I think it's also important when considering these goals and these strategies to think about the resilience component and the adaptation component. So for instance, if we're thinking about storage and having solar on all of our buildings versus on a field or whatever, what does that also mean in the broader community context for wildfire or energy grid resilience or independence, or what role can the town hall play if a natural disaster strikes and energy is gone from everywhere else, but the town of Truckee actually has a backup system so everyone can come here. You know, these kinds of broader considerations we should be thinking about for the general plan update and the energy goals in general. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we will close public comment and we'll bring this back to council for discussion. Any further questions or a recommendation? So anyone want to, any questions, follow-up questions?
No follow-up question. I think I tormented staff enough with my questions ahead of time, and thank you, everybody, for answering all of them, Russell included. You guys did a great job on putting this report together. I also just want to give a little shout out to Truckee Donner PUD. I think they serve our community really well. They've given great rebates to the school district. I see them doing that again here. They deserve credit for that. They are a great partner in this. And I do also hope that they are coming to the table to be part, to continue the seed discussion at the very least, so that we understand what our options are. There are definitely great savings in this report. I'm in full support of implementing the recommendations from the report, which we will consider in our budget. The only thing missing, as everybody knows, in my opinion, is a dashboard. So we're going to work on that, though, I understand, and critically one that is going to help us identify things like the heat trace being left on all summer. That's a really quick and easy one to identify if you've got it on a building management system and a dashboard. And believe me, there's a lot more of those out there that we're not even aware of because we can't see them. It was amazing the things that we found when we implemented our dashboards at the school district. And those things really do add up, especially when it's day after day, month after month, year after year of these things just running and nobody knows. So that's my only addition. I would really like to see some options brought forward for a dashboard for us to consider for our facilities. And let's go get this work done.
Here. I would only add that I think the details of the seed fund versus the procurement process, I mean, it's great to have the visibility, but ultimately that's not something to, dictate from the dais. So we trust that you all are aligned enough on the goals of the town, both fiscally and energy-wise, to get the right path forward. And I think for some good comments here, I think regional collaboration is good, and it's something to balance with our efforts. And otherwise, just thrilled that we have the time to dig into this, and really grateful that we have the staff and the community support that we have, so that we can keep really pushing forward.
Yeah, I completely agree. I appreciate all the work that's been done and don't really have anything additional to add. I think we should accept the results of the strategic energy plan and move forward with it. And like Morgan said, that really to trust staff as far as seed versus implementing on our own, and kind of the best way to move forward with all of that.
I agree with everything I've heard up here, and I also really appreciate the public comment tonight. Was very very insightful, and I never looked at as acceptance of the report as meaning that we're not going to continue to explore options. I think that is always kind of in our purview, and something that's important that we continue to do. So I with that, would certainly be in favor of accepting the report and continuing to explore options and moving forward. So with that.
So moved.
Okay. So we have do we need to vote on this, or we, okay. All right. Very good. Again, thank you everyone who came out. With that, we have one last item. I want to take a quick check here. Do we need how about a 5-minute break? Because we've been up here sitting for 2.
I think it's going to be quick enough that we might not even.
Well, okay. All right. No, we're good then. If it's a one slide deck, we're probably fine.
That's it. So obviously we brought this to you on a timed item because it's an ordinance change and that requires a timed item. And so we just did some fairly simple cleanup of language within the TOT ordinance that allows us to use our enforcement avenues that we have right now, and then clarifies when we consider a short-term rental to be for rent, and that's when it's placed out as advertised. And so we just didn't have that clear language, and our esteemed town attorney helped us to correct that, and we may find things again over time that we need to modify to make our processes better. So that's all this is. And then if you follow this recommendation to introduce and waive, we'll bring it back to you one more time, and it'll be 30 days later, it becomes part of the ordinance.
Thank you, Kim. Any questions? All right. No questions from council. Any public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and look for a motion or discussion if anyone cares to discuss. I think the report was pretty clear.
No, I think this makes perfect sense. Yeah. And it gives gives the town the option to levy the fees versus trying to do the whole court process, which is just messy. So no, it's good housekeeping. Good job.
We're all kind of nodding and agree. So.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
I move that that we approve, or that the council introduce and waive the first reading of the ordinance 2019-05, updating Chapter 3.24, transient occupancy tax of the Truckee Municipal Code.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Nicely done, team.
Yeah. Okay, with that, we are at council reports, and tonight we're going to start with Councilmember Abrams.
I think I just attended the budget workshop last Tuesday. I believe that's my only report.
Okay, Councilmember Klofstadt.
Oh, we all had a great time at the budget workshop. Actually, it was such a relief to understand a little bit more. Attended the third meeting of the GPAC, volunteered to work on the climate technical committee. I also sat in on the value engineering process for the Corp Yard, which I have to give staff, the design team, and the construction team kudos. They really did a great job looking at creative solutions for that budget situation. And then me and my family went to the Sierra Senior Services Pancake Breakfast on Sunday, and they want to talk affordable housing for seniors. Just warning you. Okay.
As they should.
Vice Mayor Goodwin.
This afternoon, I was in Tahoe City, remotely attending the Placer County Supervisors meeting going on in Auburn for the selection of the District 5 Supervisor replacing Jennifer Montgomery. I gave public comment as an individual to the effect that we greatly value the collaboration and working relationship that we had with Ms. Montgomery on housing and transportation, and their next supervisor should be someone who gets that. The decision was postponed until Thursday morning because one of their supervisors was absent today, so we were expecting a decision today, but we did not have that. They did sort of interviews, or each of the candidates got to introduce themselves, and there were 20, I believe. And then there was public comment after that. But then Thursday morning, they'll come back and do more process. So Thursday morning, 9 a.m., if anyone is interested, and I believe you can attend remotely in Tahoe City. I was at the Mountain Housing Council meeting on Friday morning. An amazingly engaged group, a lot of updates. Jeff, I think I sent you a long kind of report back that might be easier to send out to council rather than, because I don't have it all here. Thursday night, sort of not really with my town hat on, but I want to update everyone. Had a great conversation with about 30 folks about the Strong Towns organization and what that platform might mean for housing, and as well as other aspects of the community, everything from infrastructure to climate change. I think we're going to be seeing more energy around that. Attended the budget workshop, attended the entrepreneurial ecosystem meeting of the Truckee Tomorrow effort, and then I think, Mayor, you might owe me for this one, but I helped cut the ribbon at the T-Mobile grand opening. They made me wear a pink T-Mobile bow tie, and I guess it's worth noting that they offer free phone troubleshooting help to anyone, whether or not you're a T-Mobile customer. And they also have deals for veterans. So yes, it is marketing, but I figure those are helpful public service announcements.
Thank you for that. Is there a photograph of that of the pink bow tie being
I'll send
worn?
it to you. I asked them not to post it.
All right. Well, I don't, since our last council meeting, I took the time between then and now, some personal time in France, so don't have anything to report with my town hat on, but I will say this: there's some very inspirational things going on in France in terms of public transportation. There have been for a long time. Incredible public transportation options, walkability of communities, free bicycles, free scooters, electric at that, electric scooters all over Paris. So really, really cool stuff going on and inspirational. So anyway, with that, we will adjourn this meeting, and our next regular Truckee Town Council meeting will take place on October is jet lag speaking, April 23rd, 2019. Thank you.